a werewolf romance audiobook written by Annabelle. By the time you finish this story, you'll understand why some cages are built not to keep you in, but to keep the world out. Prologue. I still remember the exact scent of the air when he said it. Pine and cold earth. The smoke from the bonfire. And something deeper. Something that smelled like him. Like home. Like mine. I'd waited 22 years to find my mate. 22 years of watching other she-wolves get pulled toward their person with that invisible thread. That sacred, unbreakable pull. While I stood on the outside of something I couldn't name. And then I walked into the claiming ceremony. And my world cracked open. His eyes found me across the fire before I even registered who he was. Gold bleeding into deep amber. A jaw that looked carved from something harder than stone. The kind of stillness in a man that doesn't come from peace. It comes from control. Alpha Caden Cross. The most powerful wolf in 3 territories. My mate. The bond hit me like a wave breaking against the inside of my ribcage. A low, deep hum that started in my chest and radiated outward. Through my spine, my fingertips, the back of my teeth. I thought he felt it too. He did. I saw it in the way his hand tightened around the glass he was holding. In the way the muscle in his jaw jumped once, just once. In the way his eyes stayed on me for exactly 3 seconds before something shuddered in them. Something closed. Something chose. He set down the glass. He walked toward me. And every wolf in that clearing felt the weight of that moment. The fire crackled. The music stopped. The alpha was approaching an unmated she-wolf in the middle of the claiming ceremony. And everyone knew what that meant. I thought I knew what it meant. He stopped 2 feet away from me. Close enough that I could smell him properly. Cedar and dark amber, and something faintly electric, like the air before lightning. Close enough that I nearly swayed forward. He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. And then he said clearly in front of everyone, "I reject you." 3 words. That's all it took. 3 words and the bond didn't shatter. It screamed. Pain tore through my chest like something physical. Like teeth. I pressed my hand to my sternum and tried to breathe through it. But breathing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The fire was too bright. The eyes on me were too many. The sound of the pack murmuring around me. Curious, shocked, some of them pleased. Pressed down on my shoulders like weight. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just watched me with those gold eyes. Cold and flat and certain, and waited. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. The worst came 3 days later. When I tried to leave, and he locked me up. Chapter 1. Here's something no one tells you about rejection. It doesn't just hurt. It changes things. The bond doesn't disappear when an alpha rejects you. The severing doesn't happen cleanly. It hangs, half-cut, fraying like a rope someone sliced halfway through. You can feel the place where it used to be whole. The ghost of it lives in your chest like a bruise you keep pressing just to remind yourself it's real. I pressed it a lot those first 3 days. I stayed in my cabin at the edge of pack territory. I didn't eat much. Maris came by twice. My only real friend in this pack, a small, fierce wolf with copper-brown skin and more loyalty than sense. And I let her in both times, but I didn't let her stay long. I was thinking. Quietly. Carefully. The way you think when you've already made a decision, but you need time to make peace with it. I was leaving Blackthorn. The decision wasn't emotional. Or, it was, but not in the way it might have been a year ago. A year ago, rejection would have broken me. Would have sent me crawling back to whatever scraps of belonging I could find. But I was 22 years old, and I had already survived too much to stay somewhere I wasn't wanted. My parents were gone. I had no blood family in this pack. I was ranked Omega. The lowest rung, the last in the hierarchy, the wolf everyone pitted and no one prioritized. The only reason I'd stayed this long was the faint, stupid hope that the mate bond would change something. It had, just not in the direction I'd wanted. So on the morning of the 3rd day, I packed. I didn't take much. A backpack. Some clothes. The small leather journal my mother left me. The $143 I'd saved from working in the pack's supply house. I was going to walk out of here like I walked in. Quietly. Without asking anyone's permission. I was almost to the tree line when I smelled him. Cedar and dark amber. Lightning. I stopped. Every muscle in my body went still. Not from fear, but from that involuntary thing the bond did when he was close. That pull. That hum. Even half severed and bleeding at the edges, it recognized him. It wanted him. I hated it. Going somewhere? His voice came from my left. low, controlled. The kind of voice that expected the world to rearrange itself when it spoke. I didn't turn around. Yes, I said. No, he said. You're not. Now I turned. He was standing at the edge of the path, arms crossed, wearing a plain dark jacket like he hadn't come here prepared for a confrontation. Like he'd just materialized here, at the exact moment of my leaving, completely by accident. Nothing about Caden Cross was an accident. You don't get to tell me where I go, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. You rejected me. You made your position very clear in front of the entire pack. I don't belong here anymore. You belong exactly where I put you. The words hit me sideways. Excuse me. He stepped forward, not aggressively, but with that slow, deliberate certainty that made the air around him feel pressurized. You are not leaving Blackthorn territory, he said. Not today. Not until I say otherwise. I stared at him. This man had publicly humiliated me 3 days ago, had stood in front of every wolf in this pack, and cut the thread between us like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. And now he was telling me I couldn't leave. You have no authority over me, I said. Not anymore. The rejection severed any claim. The rejection, he said quietly, didn't sever anything. Something in his tone made me go still. What? You heard me. That's not how rejections work. Once an alpha. I know how rejections work. His eyes held mine. Those gold eyes. Flat and controlled and carrying something underneath. Something I couldn't read. What happened at the ceremony was not a standard rejection. You said the words. I said the words. A pause. But the bond didn't break. Did it? My mouth closed. Because he was right. I'd felt it. The incomplete severing. The fraying. I told myself it was just residual pain, the echo of something that used to be whole. But it hadn't faded in 3 days. If anything, it had gotten stronger. Why? I asked. The word came out quieter than I intended. That's a longer conversation. Then start talking. Something crossed his face, not quite emotion, but the shadow of one. There and gone. Come back inside the territory, he said. Let me explain. No. I adjusted the strap of my backpack. Explain here or I walk. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, just once, to someone behind me. I spun around. 2 pack enforcers stepped out of the tree line. Large. Expressionless. Blocking the path I'd been walking toward. I turned back to Caden. The cold fury that moved through me was unlike anything I'd felt before. Something low and dark. Not just anger, but something beneath it. Something with pressure behind it, like a sound wave building before it becomes noise. You're really doing this, I said. You're going to imprison me. I'm going to protect you, he said. The words were quiet. Certain. And somehow that made them worse. You don't get to reject me and then protect me, I said. Pick one. His jaw tightened. Lena. My name in his mouth felt like something I shouldn't have to hear. Like touching something that burned. Come inside. Please. The please surprised me. It surprised him too. I could tell by the fractional tightening around his eyes. I looked at the enforcers. I looked at the trees. I looked at him. You have 24 hours, I said. Explain whatever you think you need to explain. And then I'm leaving. And you're not going to stop me. He said nothing. He just turned and walked back toward the pack house. And I followed. Because I needed to understand. And because deep in the bruised, half-severed thing in my chest, some part of me already knew this was bigger than a rejection. I just didn't know how much bigger. Not yet. Chapter 2. He didn't take me to his office. He took me to the East Wing. The part of the Blackthorn pack house that regular members didn't enter. The corridor was quieter here. The walls thicker, the lighting dimmer. Everything carrying that particular stillness of rooms that held things people didn't want found. I noticed when the door closed behind me that there was no handle on the inside. I noticed. I filed it away. The room itself wasn't a cell. Not the way I might have imagined one. There was a real bed. A window barred, though the bars were worked into the design with enough elegance that you might miss them on a quick glance. A small bookshelf. A bathroom. Someone had put fresh flowers on the small table near the window. White wildflowers, the kind that grew along the creek at the east border. The detail bothered me more than the bars. It meant this had been prepared. It meant he'd known I'd try to leave. It meant he'd been ready. How long have you been planning this? I asked. He was standing near the window, his back half turned to me, looking out at the gray morning through glass and iron. Since the night I found out who you were, he said. You know who I am. I've been in this pack for 4 years. I know who you are. He turned then. I don't think you do. I crossed my arms, kept my voice level. Explain. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words with that same deliberate precision he brought to everything, like he was constructing something that needed to hold weight. What do you know about your mother? He asked. The question hit somewhere I wasn't expecting. She died when I was 9, I said. Rogue attack. Why? And your father? Never met him. I kept my face still. This is not an explanation. This is you asking me questions. I'm building towards something. Build faster. His eyes moved over me. Not in the way they had at the ceremony. Not with that brief flash of something raw before the shuddering. This was more like assessment. Clinical. Careful. Your mother's name before she joined this pack, he said. Do you know it? I hesitated. Maris had helped me piece together some of my mother's history 2 years ago, after I'd found the journal. I knew she'd come from somewhere else. A smaller pack farther north. Ashford was her name when she came here, I said. That wasn't her birth name. I know that. Her birth name, Caden said, was Sable Voss. I didn't recognize it, but something in my body did. That pressure I'd felt at the tree line, that low, dark gathering of something, stirred again. Just slightly, like a sleeping thing turning over. I don't know that name, I said carefully. I know you don't. He moved away from the window and toward the bookshelf. He pulled a worn, leather-bound volume from the top shelf. Not a personal book, an official one, the kind pack archivists kept. He set it on the table between us and opened it to a page marked with a red ribbon. I looked down. Bloodborne Registry. 3rd Continent Pack Records. Updated by the High Tribunal. Year 89 of the current age. Below the heading was a list of names. 10, maybe 12. Each with dates. Parentage. Status. He pointed to one near the bottom of the page. Sable Voss, formerly Sable Ashford. Bloodborne confirmed. Status contained. Mate bonded to Pack Alpha, Blackthorn Territory. Power, suppressed via bond. Deceased year 102. My eyes moved up, then down, then up again. Bloodborne, I said slowly. What does that mean? It means, Caden said, that your mother was born with a power that existed outside the normal hierarchy of wolf gifts. It means she carried something in her blood that the High Tribunal flagged as, he paused, destabilizing. Destabilizing how? A bloodborne can shatter pack bonds. His voice was controlled, but it had an edge now, like he was reciting something he'd rehearsed. Not just mate bonds. All bonds. The social structure that holds a pack together. The alpha bond, the loyalty threads, the hierarchy. A bloodborne at full power can unravel it. Completely. Across an entire territory. Silence. And you think You're not just a bloodborne, he said quietly. You're a 2nd-generation bloodborne. Your mother's gift combined with your father's bloodline. He stopped himself. My father's bloodline, I repeated. You know who my father is. His jaw tightened. Caden. That conversation comes later. No. Later. The alpha tone. Not angry but absolute. The kind of voice that had command sewn into every syllable. My wolf responded to it before I could stop her. A reflexive submission in my posture. Just for a half-second before I pulled myself back. I hated that he could do that. You locked me in this room, I said, because you're afraid of what I am. I locked you in this room, he said, because if you cross the pack boundary without the bond active, without whatever is suppressing your power, the full weight of your gift will release, and you will not be able to control it. How do you know that? Because it happened to your mother. A cold quiet moved over me. She survived a rogue attack, I said. Lena. His voice changed, just slightly. Something almost human in it. Your mother didn't die in a rogue attack. I stared at him. She crossed the boundary, he said. She was angry. She had the same fire you do. That same refusal to be contained. And she walked across the border of Blackthorn territory with her power unsuppressed. He looked at me with those gold eyes, and for the first time since the ceremony, I couldn't find the coldness in them. The release killed her, and it nearly killed half the pack with her. The room was very quiet. Outside the barred window, I could hear wind moving through pine trees. I looked down at the page again. Sable Voss. Bloodborne confirmed. Status contained. Deceased year 102. I'd been 9 when she died. I'd been told she died protecting me. Why didn't anyone tell me? My voice came out strange. 4 years in this pack. For years. Someone knew. Your mother made your father promise not to tell you until you were old enough to understand the full weight of it. He paused. And then your father. He stopped. Then my father what? I asked. He closed the book. One thing at a time, he said. Stop doing that. I stepped toward him. Close enough that the bond hummed in warning and want simultaneously. Close enough that I could smell him, and I hated that I liked it. Stop deciding what I'm ready for. I am a grown woman. This is my life. My mother's life. My power. You don't get to ration information about my own existence. He looked down at me. We were close now. Too close. I could see the exact moment his carefully maintained control cracked. Just one fracture line, running from the corner of his jaw to the tension in his shoulders. Your father, he said very quietly, is the reason I rejected you. My heart stopped. Just for a moment. Then it started again, harder. Faster. A wild, frantic rhythm. What? I said. Your father is. A knock at the door. Sharp. Urgent. Caden's expression closed over like a door slamming shut. This isn't over, I said. I know. He moved toward the door. Don't do anything reckless. Don't tell me what to do in a room you locked me in. He paused with his hand on the frame. And without turning around, quietly, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, I'm sorry. For the ceremony. For the way I did it. Then he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. No handle on the inside. Just me. And the book on the table. And my mother's name on a page that rewritten everything I thought I knew about my life. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands to my sternum, where the bruised half-bond still pulsed like something alive. And I thought, what power lives in me, that even an alpha is afraid of it. Chapter 3. The book had 47 pages beyond the registry entry. I read all of them. By the time the light through the barred window shifted from gray morning to pale afternoon, I had read about bloodborns across 3 generations. I had read about what happened when one left their pack territory untethered. I had read the clinical, archival language of a high tribunal that treated people like my mother as problems to be managed, gifts to be suppressed, powers to be contained. I had read, in one brutal paragraph toward the end, the phrase, in the case of a second-generation bloodborn, particularly one born of a bloodborne mother and an alpha father, the resulting power amplification is considered theoretically unmanageable. No second-generation bloodborne has survived past age 25 without either permanent bond suppression or tribunal intervention. No second-generation bloodborne had survived past 25. I was 22. I closed the book. I stood up and walked to the window and pressed my palm flat against the glass and looked out at the pine trees and the gray sky and tried to feel afraid. I couldn't. What I felt was angry. Bone deep, quiet, very focused angry. Someone had known about this my entire life. Someone had watched me grow up in this pack, small and underranked and grieving a mother I'd been lied to about, and said nothing. Let me reach the age of 22 without the information I needed to understand my own existence. And now an alpha who had publicly rejected me was keeping me in a room with no door handle for my own protection. I heard the door open behind me, but the scent was wrong. Not cedar and lightning. This was something sweeter. Floral, with an edge of something sharp beneath it. I turned. Serafini Cross stood in the doorway. She was beautiful. The way things with edges are beautiful. High cheekbones. Silver blonde hair that fell past her shoulders. The kind of posture that had been trained into someone from birth. She was wearing what looked like a casually expensive sweater. But nothing about Serafini was casual. She was Caden's chosen Luna. Not his mate, chosen. A political arrangement with her father's pack to the west. She'd been here 6 months, and in 6 months she'd made it abundantly clear that the pack house was hers and everyone in it answered to her. She looked at me the way she always looked at me. Like I was something unpleasant that kept appearing in her peripheral vision. He sent you? I asked. He doesn't know I'm here. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft, deliberate click. I wanted to speak with you alone. About what? About the fact that you are going to keep trying to leave. She said it like it was obvious. Tiresome even. And I wanted to save us all the time and tell you, don't. You came here to tell me not to escape. I came here to tell you what happens if you do. She moved to the chair near the window. Caden's chair, the one he'd stood next to for most of our conversation. and sat in it like she owned not just the chair but the air around it. You read the book. I kept my expression still. Yes. Then you know about the power. Some of it. Let me tell you what the book doesn't say. She crossed one leg over the other. Unhurried. The book was written by the tribunal. The tribunal suppresses bloodborns because bloodborns are inconvenient. But the real reason, the reason they don't put in their archive, is that a second-generation bloodborn at full power doesn't just destabilize pack bonds. She paused. She rewrites them. I waited. Mate bonds. Loyalty bonds. Alpha bonds. All of it. Serafini's silver eyes met mine. A second-generation bloodborn at full release can shatter the bond between any alpha and his claimed Luna. Her voice held perfectly level, and redirect it. Permanently. To herself. The air in the room felt different. That's why Caden rejected me, I said slowly. He rejected you, Serafini said, to suppress your power. The rejection, the performance of it, the public shame, it was designed to compress the bond. Shame suppresses bloodborne ability. Emotional humiliation reduces the activation threshold. She tilted her head. He was trying to buy time. Time for what? To find a way to tell you without triggering the release. Something moved in her face, not quite sympathy, not quite its opposite. You weren't supposed to try to leave before he explained. He had 3 days to explain. He was afraid. The word sat strangely in the room. Afraid. Caden Cross afraid. Of me, I said. Of what knowing might do to you. Serafini uncrossed her legs. Stood. Moved back toward the door with that liquid, precise grace of hers. For what it's worth, I don't like this situation any more than you do. I have my own arrangement with Caden that is entirely separate from whatever this is. I intend to keep it. She paused at the door. But I am not your enemy, Lena. Whatever you may think. Why are you telling me this? She was quiet for a moment. Because he won't tell you everything, she said. He'll ration it. Protect you from pieces of it. He thinks that's kindness. A pause. It isn't. And I think, on some level, he knows that. She put her hand on the door. Ask him about your father's name, she said. Don't let him redirect. Don't let him table it. Make him say the name. And then she left. The door clicked shut again. No handle on the inside. I stood very still in the middle of the room. My mother's power. My unknown father. A bond that hadn't broken. An alpha who rejected me to contain me. A chosen Luna who was warning me to push for answers. 3 days ago, I thought I understood my life. I didn't. Not even the shape of it. I walked back to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass and tried to reach inward, toward the things Serafini had described. The power. The gift or curse or weapon that lived somewhere in the architecture of who I was. I couldn't feel it. But something felt back. A warmth, deep and low and dark, like an ember that had been waiting a very long time for someone to look at it. I lifted my head. Outside, through the pine trees, I saw Caden standing at the edge of the tree line. He wasn't looking at the trees. He was looking up at this window. At me. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders. He looked like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't take back. Good, I thought. He should. Because I was about to make him say everything. Every piece of it. And if he tried to lock information away from me the way he'd locked me in this room, then bloodborne power or no bloodborne power, I was going to find my own way through that tree line. And he could decide whether he was brave enough to stop me. Chapter 4. He came back at dusk. I heard his footsteps in the corridor before I smelled him. That particular weight of his stride, unhurried but deliberate, the kind of walk that didn't apologize for the space it took up. I was sitting on the floor when he entered. Not on the bed, not in the chair. On the floor, cross-legged, with the open registry book in my lap, and 3 pages of notes I'd written in the margins of a spare sheet of paper I'd found in the nightstand drawer. He looked at me sitting on the floor. He looked at the notes. Something moved in his face, not quite guilt, not quite relief. Something caught between the two. You read it all, he said. Every word. I didn't stand up. I wasn't going to perform deference for him in a room he'd locked me in. Sit down. We're finishing what you started this morning. He hesitated. Then he sat, not in the chair by the window, but on the floor, across from me. It surprised me enough that I lost a beat. An alpha, sitting on the floor of a room in his own pack house, cross-legged, like this was something ordinary. Like he was trying to meet me somewhere. I didn't let the surprise soften me. Your father, I said. Say the name. His jaw tightened. Lena, you told me this morning that my father is the reason you rejected me. I held his gaze. Those gold eyes, trying to be walls and failing at the edges. Say the name. A long silence. The room felt very still. Outside, the dusk was settling into full dark, and the pine trees had gone from gray-green to deep shadow, and somewhere beyond the window a night bird was calling, low and hollow and repeated. Marcus Vale, he said. I didn't recognize it, but that ember inside me, that low, dark warmth I'd touched against earlier, flared. Just once. A heat that moved through my chest and down my arms and out through my fingertips, and then pulled back, like a tide retreating. I pressed my hand flat against my sternum. Who is Marcus Vale? I asked. My voice stayed steady. Impressive, I thought, considering. Caden watched my hand on my chest. Did you feel something? He asked. Answer the question. Lena, answer the question. Marcus Vale, he said carefully, is the alpha of the Ashen Tribunal. Everything in me went quiet. The Ashen Tribunal. I knew that name. Every wolf in every pack on 3 continents knew that name. The Shadow Council that operated parallel to the High Tribunal. Older, darker, without the paper trail or the procedural language. The Ashen Tribunal didn't archive things. They buried them. They were the reason packs had enforcers who trained for threats outside the hierarchy. They were the reason certain pack territories had border wards that cost more than most wolves made in a year. They were, by most accounts, the reason 3 packs in the Northern Territories had gone silent over the last decade. Just gone quiet. No communication. No new members leaving. No confirmation of disaster. Just silence. My father, I said slowly, leads the Ashen Tribunal. Yes. And my mother ran from him. Caden's voice was flat and controlled, but I could hear the thing underneath. The thing he was managing. She was already bloodborne when he found her. He didn't love her. He identified her. Because a bloodborne mate would produce a child whose power would be. He stopped. Unmanageable, I said. That's the word the book used. The book was written by people who were afraid of what you could do. He met my eyes. Marcus Vale is not afraid of it. He wants it. The implications settled over me slowly. Like snow. Quiet and cold and covering everything. He wants me, I said. He's been looking for you since your mother died. Caden kept his voice level, but his hands, I noticed his hands, had tightened where they rested on his knees. She hid you. Changed your name. Buried your bloodline records. Put you in a small pack far enough from tribunal territory that he couldn't track the bloodborne scent. It worked for 13 years. A pause. Until you came to Blackthorn. And Blackthorn is how he found me. No. His voice dropped. I am how he found you. I stared at him. What? When I ran the mate bond check at the last ceremony, standard procedure, we scan every unmated wolf in the pack for potential bonds. Your bloodline flagged in the system. The same system the tribunal has access to. His jaw moved. I don't know how the information reached him. I had safeguards in place. Someone inside this pack fed it to him. A traitor. Inside Blackthorn. The layers of this kept expanding. Every time I thought I'd found the edges, they moved outward. And the rejection, I said. You did it publicly. In front of every wolf in the pack. Why public? Why couldn't you just? Because Vale has informants. His voice was controlled. I needed whoever is feeding him information to see the rejection. To report back that the alpha of Blackthorn had publicly severed his bond with the bloodborne she-wolf. That she was shamed, diminished, no longer under alpha protection. You used my humiliation as a cover story, I said. I was trying to make Vale think you weren't valuable to me. He looked at me steadily. Because if he believed you were, if he believed I was claiming you, protecting you as a mate, he would come for you within days. With everything he has. And instead he thinks you're a rejected Omega nobody. A bloodborne without an anchor, without a bond, without power. A girl licking her wounds at the edge of a packed territory. Caden held my gaze. Not worth a full-scale extraction. Yet, I said. Yet, he agreed. I sat with that for a moment. The night bird outside had gone quiet. The room felt very close. The room, I said slowly. The reason there's no handle on the inside is so you can't accidentally leave, he said. Not so I can keep you here against your will, Lena. I know how it looks. I know how it feels. But if you cross the boundary, even accidentally, in the middle of the night, sleepwalking or overwhelmed, The power releases and Veil's trackers will find the signature within hours. You could have told me this, I said. My voice had an edge now. Not quite anger, something sharper. Instead of locking me in and parsing information like I was a child who couldn't handle the truth. I know. You know. Yes. Simple. Direct. Without excuse. That disarmed me more than I wanted it to. Say it properly, I said. He looked at me. Say, I should have told you. From the beginning. All of it. A long pause. And then quietly. I should have told you. From the beginning. All of it. The words sat between us. I wanted to stay angry. I was angry. The anger wasn't gone. It was just rearranging itself around the new shape of everything, finding the places it fit. What happens now? I asked. Now we figure out how to strengthen your suppression without the bond working at full strength. He shifted, and I noticed how carefully he kept distance between us, even sitting on the floor at this range, even with the bond pulling between us like a magnet leaning into its pair. There are ways, old methods. Your mother used them before she was bond suppressed. And if Veil comes before we figure it out, his expression didn't change. But his scent did. Something sharp moved through the cedar and amber. Something with an edge I recognized, because I'd smelled it on pack enforcers before dangerous runs. Readiness. Controlled violence, held in reserve. He won't get to you, Caden said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have tonight. I looked at him. Really looked, the way I hadn't let myself since the ceremony. The lines of his face. The way he held himself, even on the floor, like the world might need to be carried at a moment's notice. The exhaustion around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. How long had he been carrying this? How long had he known and planned and positioned pieces around me without telling me I was the thing at the center of the board? I want the door handled fixed, I said. Lena, I will stay in this territory willingly. I understand the stakes now. But I need a door that opens from the inside. I held his gaze. You want my cooperation. That's the price of it. He studied me. Then slowly he nodded. By morning, he said. Tonight, I said. His mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. Something that was the shadow of one. Reluctant and real. Tonight, he agreed. He stood, moved to the door, and paused, hand on the frame, back to me, exactly as he had that morning. Your father, he said. Marcus Vale. He's not just looking for a weapon, Lena. He's looking for a key. I went still. A key to what? He was quiet for a moment. That's tomorrow's conversation. He walked out. And this time, I felt the ember in my chest respond to his leaving. Not with grief. With something that felt disturbingly like fury. The kind that builds. The kind that finds a direction. I pulled my knees to my chest and sat in the dark room and let it build. A key. I was a key. To something Marcus Vale had been searching for since before I was born. And somewhere in this pack, someone was reporting back to him. Which meant the danger wasn't just outside the boundary. It was already inside. Chapter 5. Maris came in the morning. She appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee and the expression she wore when she was trying to look casual and failing completely. Her jaw too set, her eyes too careful. I let her in. I took the coffee. How much do you know? I asked. She sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me with those dark, honest eyes. More than you think, she said. Less than you deserve. Tell me. Caden asked me not to. Maris. She sighed. I've known something was off about your bloodline since your 2nd year here, she said. I ran supply inventory with your mother's old pack records once, by accident, a misfiled request, and I saw the bloodborne flag. I didn't know what it meant then. I looked it up later. She paused. And then I was told very clearly by a very large alpha that it was pack business and above my rank and to forget what I'd seen. And you forgot. I absolutely did not forget. She looked at me steadily. But I didn't know what to do with it. You were happy enough. Settled enough. And the information felt dangerous. Like if I handed it to you, it might be the thing that unraveled you. It unraveled me anyway, I said. I know. Her voice was soft. I'm sorry. I drank my coffee. It was good coffee. She'd remembered how I liked it, which was black with 1 spoonful of something sweet, a combination she always called contradictory, and made for me anyway. There's a traitor in the pack, I said. She didn't look surprised. That surprised me. You already know, I said. I have a suspicion. She set her mug down. But suspicions about tribunal informants aren't the kind of thing you voice until you're sure. Because if you're wrong, she drew one finger across her throat. And if you're right and they find out you suspect them, she repeated the gesture. Who? I asked. I'm not saying until I'm certain. Maris. I'm not saying. Firm. Final. The face she made when the conversation was closed. What I will say is, keep your circle small. Don't share anything new you learn with anyone outside this room. I looked at her. Anyone, she repeated. Even people who seem like they're helping you. My mind went immediately to Serafini, the silver-blonde woman in the chair, telling me to push for my father's name, giving me information that turned out to be accurate, positioning herself as a reluctant ally. I'm not your enemy, Lena. Would someone feed me accurate information to gain my trust? I said slowly. And then use that trust later? Maris picked her mug back up. It's the oldest play in the tribunal handbook, she said. My stomach tightened. How do you know the tribunal handbook? She met my eyes. Because my older sister was taken by them, she said quietly. 12 years ago. She was a healer, bloodborne adjacent, not full bloodborne, but enough of a gift to flag. They came for her in the night, presented papers, said she was volunteering for a tribunal research program. She paused. I never saw her again. The weight of that sat between us. I hadn't known. In 4 years, I hadn't known this about her. You came to Blackthorn because of her, I said. I came to Blackthorn because Caden Cross was the alpha most likely to resist the tribunal, she said. He has a reputation. Among the people the tribunal targets, he's known for hiding them, running interference, costing them assets. She gave me a steady look. He's been doing it for 8 years. Quietly, without advertising it. I thought about that. About the image of Caden I'd been building in my head since the ceremony. The cold alpha, the calculating man, the one who used my humiliation as a tactical shield. Maris was giving me pieces that complicated that image. They didn't excuse him, but they complicated him. He's been protecting people, I said. He's been trying to. She stood, collecting both mugs. He's not perfect at it. He's too much in his own head. Too strategic. Sometimes so focused on the chess that he forgets the pieces have feelings. She gave me a dry look. You may have noticed. I noticed, I said. But his intentions. I know. I stood too. I'm not deciding he's a villain. I'm deciding what I'm going to do with the truth. She nodded. And what are you going to do? I looked at the window. The bars worked into the design. The pine trees beyond them in the morning light. And beyond those trees, somewhere in a direction I couldn't identify, a man named Marcus Vale who had shaped the architecture of my life before I was old enough to understand I was being shaped. I'm going to learn to use it, I said. The power, whatever it is, whatever it does. I turned back to Maris. He wants a key. Then I'm going to learn what the key opens before he gets anywhere near me. Maris smiled, quick and fierce and real. Good, she said. I was hoping you'd say that. She was almost to the door when I remembered. Maris. She turned. The door handle, I said. Caden said he'd have it fixed last night. It wasn't. She looked at the door. Looked back at me. I'll tell him, she said. Tell him it's non-negotiable. She nodded. And after she left, after I stood for a moment in the quiet of the room, I reached inward again, toward the ember. It was larger than yesterday, as if the name, Marcus Vale, had fed it somehow, as if knowing had added fuel. I touched it carefully, just the edge, and it responded warm and dark and vast, like touching the surface of a very deep lake and feeling the depth beneath, all that water, all that pressure, all that cold, quiet strength. I pulled back, not from fear, from caution, the kind of caution you have towards something enormous that you don't yet know how to hold. But I would learn. I had to, because across whatever distance separated us, Marcus Vale already knew what I was. And if he moved before I was ready, if he reached Blackthorn before I understood the power in my own blood, then all of Caden's planning, all of Maris's suspicions, all of Serafini's careful warnings, none of it would matter. I needed to be ready. I needed to start now. The question was who I could trust to help me, and whether the one person most equipped to teach me was the same one who had broken me in front of my entire pack, and whether I could learn from him without losing myself in the process. The door opened. Caden, a small tool in his hand. He crouched at the door and, without a word, without ceremony, installed a door handle on the inside. He stood, tested it, opened and closed the door twice. Then he looked at me. "Does that work?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded once. And then, surprising me, he stayed. "I want to start today," I said. "Teaching me about the power. Whatever methods your mother used. Whatever you know about bloodborne training. It's not training exactly. Whatever it is. I want to start." He studied me for a moment. "You're not going to keep pushing to leave," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Not today," I said honestly. "Today I want information. I want to understand what I am. After that." I met his eyes. "We'll negotiate." Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. "But it's cousin." "Fair," he said. He moved to the window. And I sat back down, on the floor again, because the floor felt honest in a way the furniture didn't, and I watched him gather his thoughts. Outside, the morning light moved through the pine trees and through long, slanted patterns through the bars. And in my chest the ember waited. Patient and enormous and entirely, terrifyingly mine. Chapter 6. He didn't use the chair. He sat on the floor again, across from me, that same deliberate meeting of levels that I hadn't forgotten from last night. I didn't comment on it, but I noticed. I kept noticing things about him that I didn't want to notice. The way he thought before he spoke, actually thought, not performing thought. The way he held still without fidgeting, a completeness to his stillness that most people never achieved. The thin scar that ran from below his left ear to the edge of his jaw, old and faded, something that had healed years ago and left its signature. The bond noticed him too. It was always there. That low hum, that pull like a current running just below the surface of everything. Even half-severed. Even fraying. I focused past it. "Tell me what it feels like," he said. "The power. When you touch it." I looked at him. "You want me to describe my own power to you? I've read about bloodborne gifts. I've never spoken to one who was conscious of the ability." A pause. "Your mother was bond-suppressed by the time she could have described it. She couldn't access it even to explain it." I thought about that. My mother, Sable Voss, bloodborne, confirmed. Living in this pack for years with her gift pressed down under the weight of a bond. Unable to feel it. Unable to reach it. Had she missed it? Had she felt its absence like a missing limb? "It's warm," I said. "Deep. Like..." I searched for the right shape of the words. "Like a lake under ice. You can feel the depth even when you can't see it. When I touch it, there's this pressure. Like something leaning against the inside of my sternum." Caden nodded. He was very still. "Can you feel it now?" he asked. "Yes." "What does it want to do?" Strange question. I reached inward, just slightly. Testing. The ember was immediate. It knew I was there. It oriented toward my attention, the way a sunflower turns. "Reach," I said. "It wants to reach. Outward. I can feel it like fingers trying to extend." "Reach toward what?" I opened my eyes. "The bonds," I said. Slowly. "I can feel them. Not my bond with you, the others. The pack bonds." I pressed my hand to my chest again, trying to describe something I was only half understanding in real time. "There's this web. I can feel it. All the connections in this pack. The hierarchy threads. The mate bonds. Every loyalty thread." Something in Caden's expression shifted. "You can feel them right now?" "Yes. Faintly. Like I can see the shapes of them in the dark." He leaned forward, just slightly. "Can you tell which threads are stronger?" he asked. I closed my eyes again. Reached carefully. Like touching something fragile. The web was complex. Dozens of threads at different tensions, different textures. Some bright and taut, vibrating with active loyalty. Some softer, older, the bonds of wolves who'd been in this pack for decades. Worn smooth and deep-rooted. And then, one thread that felt different. It was vibrating wrong. Not broken. Not severed. But altered. Like a string that had been retuned to a different note from the outside. "There's one that's been changed," I said. "Manipulated. Someone, a bond thread. It's not running naturally." I heard him exhale. "Can you tell whose it is?" I tried. The thread led, outward. North. Across the pack bonds, through the connections, toward the edge of. I snapped back. The power surged, hard and sudden and unexpected. And I gasped, pressing both hands to my sternum, because for one blinding moment it had wanted to go, wanted to follow that thread to its source and pull. "Easy." Caden's voice. "Close. Easy, Lena. Pull back. Don't follow it." I pulled back, breathing. The ember retreated, sulking but retreated. When I opened my eyes, Caden was leaning forward, one hand half extended toward me, and then stopped, like he'd started reaching on instinct and caught himself. His hand hovered between us. Not touching, but close. The bond screamed at the distance. "You felt it?" he asked. His voice was careful, managing something. "It wanted to go," I said, "to follow the manipulated thread. I think." I steadied my breathing. "I think if I'd let it, it would have pulled the bond apart. Whoever has that altered thread, the power wanted to break it." "That's the bloodborne gift," Caden said. "Bond disruption. You're not destroying the bond. You're overriding it. Reclaiming the natural thread from whatever external influence is running through it." "Someone is running an external influence through a pack bond," I said. "Yes. The informant." "The informant," he confirmed. "The tribunal uses an old technique, a bond bleed. They can attach a tribunal loyalty thread to an existing pack bond. The wolf doesn't feel it as foreign. It reads as their natural loyalty. But it runs in parallel, feeding information. And the bloodborne gift would sever the tribunal thread," he said, cleanly, without harming the host bond. I stared at him. "You've been waiting for this," I said. Not quite an accusation. "You've been waiting for someone who could do this." "I've been waiting for you," he said quietly. The distinction landed differently than I expected. "That's not better," I said. "That's, you want to use the power I didn't know I had." "I want to help you use it yourself," he said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." His voice was steady. "Because one version of this, I contain you, suppress you, keep you here until the threat passes, and then let you go. Useful tool, returned to storage." He met my gaze. "The other version is, I help you become someone Vale cannot touch. Someone who understands her own power well enough that no one can use it against her or for her without her knowing." I held his gaze. "Which version do you want?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. The bond hummed. Outside the window, a wind moved through the pines. "The second one," he said. "Only ever the second one." I wanted to push back. I wanted to find the calculation in it, the self-interest, the alpha agenda behind the words. Because an alpha with his resources didn't make idealistic choices without reason. But I couldn't find it. I looked at him, with the bond between us like a living thing and the ember in my chest still warm from what I'd almost done, and I couldn't find the lie. "Okay," I said. "Okay. We train." I squared my shoulders. "But we do it my way. I dictate the pace. I decide when I'm ready to push further. You give me full information, no rationing, no, that's tomorrow's conversation. Everything you know when I need it." Agreed. "And when this is over, when Vale is handled and my power is stable, I decide what I do next. Where I go. Whether I stay." I held his gaze. "You don't get to make that choice for me. Not even the bond gets to make it." Something crossed his face. "Complex. Private." "Agreed," he said again. We sat there for a moment, the alpha of Blackthorn and the girl who was supposed to be a rejected Omega nobody. Both on the floor, both watching each other across the space where a bond existed that neither of us had chosen and neither of us could entirely ignore. "One more thing," I said. "Yes." The manipulated pack bond one felt. I kept my voice even. "The informant. Is it someone I know?" He was quiet. "Don't ration it," I said. His jaw tightened. Then, "Yes," he said. "It's someone you know." I breathed. "Someone I trust." An even longer silence. "I don't know who you trust," he said carefully. "But it's someone close to you. Someone close." Maris's voice from this morning. "Keep your circle small. Don't share anything new you learn with anyone outside this room." She'd said it like a warning. Or, like someone who needed to make sure I didn't learn something before she could get ahead of it. No, I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to let paranoia eat the one real relationship I had in this pack. But the thought, once thought, wouldn't quite lie down. Someone close. I filed it. Not in the place where I kept things I believed. In the place where I kept things I needed to verify. "Tomorrow," I said. "We start in earnest." Caden nodded. He stood. And at the door, which had a handle now on the inside, and I could leave it if I wanted, he paused. "What you felt today," he said. "With the power. The way it oriented toward the manipulated thread." "Yes. That was not nothing." His voice was careful. Measured. But something in it. Something almost reverent. "Your mother spent 3 years learning to do what you just did accidentally on your first attempt." He let that sit. Then he walked out. I sat on the floor of the room. My room now, or as close to mine as a barred window in a packhouse corridor could manage, and thought about what that meant. 3 years. First attempt. And somewhere in the web of bonds I'd touched briefly, before the power surged and pulled me back, that wrongly tuned thread was still there, vibrating, waiting, feeding information to a man who thought I was a key. I pressed my palm flat to the floor and felt, very distantly, the thrum of the pack bonds running through the earth and the walls and everything that held this territory together. And I thought, not for much longer. Not once I know what I'm doing. Not once I learn how to use what's already mine. The ember agreed. Low and dark and patient as a long winter. And ready. Chapter 7. 3 days of training. 3 days of sitting on that floor, or sometimes in the clearing behind the pack house, when Caden decided the walls were too close and the power needed open air to breathe, and learning the shape of something that had lived inside me my entire life without my knowledge. It wasn't like learning a skill. It was more like learning a language that your body already spoke in its sleep. The power didn't need to be built. It didn't need to be coaxed from nothing. It just needed permission, recognition, someone to finally look it in the eye and say, I see you. I know you're there. The moment I stopped being afraid of it, it stopped surging uncontrolled. Mostly. Again, Caden said. We were in the clearing. Early morning. The light still low and amber. The dew heavy on the grass. The tree line 50 feet away in every direction. Far enough from the border that the power wouldn't trigger on proximity. Close enough to open sky that it had room to move without pressing against walls. I closed my eyes. Reached inward. The ember was immediate, warm and responsive, larger every day, as if feeding on my attention and growing. I touched it carefully. Not pushing. Just holding. Reach, I told it. It reached. The web of pack bonds spread out beneath my awareness like a map made of light. Each thread a different color, a different tension, a different song. The bright ones, the worn ones, the new ones still finding their shape. And there, that wrongly tuned thread. Still there. Still vibrating at the wrong frequency. I'd been circling it for 3 days. Getting closer each time. Learning its texture. The way it felt different from a natural bond. The tribunal influence running through it like a foreign current through a familiar wire. I can feel it clearly today, I said. The manipulated thread. Can you trace it? Caden's voice was careful. Even. The voice he used when he was managing his own reaction. I followed the thread. Gently. The way you'd follow a spider's silk without breaking it. Through the web. Across connections. Past bonds I recognized by feel now. Maris's thread, bright and fiercely loyal. 2 of the enforcers, solid and taut. The older pack members, deep-rooted as old trees. The manipulated thread led. It's connected to someone near the inner circle, I said. Someone with a high-rank bond. An alpha bond. Caden went very still. I could feel his stillness even with my eyes closed. Keep going, he said. I followed it. And then I found the source. And my eyes opened. I looked at Caden. He was watching me with those gold eyes and the muscle in his jaw was jumping once. Just once. And I knew that he already knew what I'd found. He'd already known. He'd been waiting for me to find it myself. It's Serafini, I said. The name sat between us like something dropped from a height. Yes, he said. I breathed. She came to my room on the first night. My voice was level. Processing. She told me to push you for my father's name. She gave me accurate information. I paused. She was building trust. Yes. To use later. Yes. And you knew. A pause. I suspected, he said. I needed you to confirm it. A bloodborne's read on a bond manipulation is cleaner than any external test. The tribunal knows how to hide the thread from standard detection. But not from me, I said. From you. I stood up from the grass. The ember was running hot, not surging but heated. Indignant. Serafini. The woman who'd sat in the chair in my room like she owned the air and told me she wasn't my enemy. Who'd positioned herself as the reluctant truth-teller, the insider with a conscience. She's been feeding him information, I said. Vale. The whole time she's been here. 6 months. Yes. The political arrangement with her father's pack was a tribunal fabrication. Caden's voice was controlled, but I could hear the thing beneath it now. Not anger exactly, but something harder. Her father doesn't have a Western pack. The Ashen Tribunal constructed the arrangement to give her a clean reason to be here. To watch me. To watch for you, he corrected. She arrived before the ceremony. Before the mate bond scan. They knew you were coming to Blackthorn. Someone, he paused. Someone told them before the scan even ran. I thought about that. Someone told them I was here before the scan, I said slowly. Before the official identification. Yes. Which means, I worked through it. Which means the first informant isn't Serafini. Serafini is the secondary plant. The first leak happened before she arrived. Something shifted in Caden's expression. Careful. Precise. Yes, he said. The first leak happened before Serafini. And you don't know who that is yet. No. But that person is still in the pack. Yes. 2 informants. One confirmed, Serafini, her bond thread manipulated to run tribunal loyalty in parallel to her pack connection. One unknown. The first one. The original. I stood in the morning clearing with the dew soaking into my shoes and the ember burning in my chest and thought about circles. About how small I'd been keeping mine. About Maris's warning. Keep your circle small. And whether that warning was protective or preemptive. Someone close. Tell me something, I said. My voice was very careful. Yes. The first informant. The original leak. When you say it's someone close to me. I held his gaze. Do you mean someone I've chosen to trust? Or someone I trust by default because of proximity? Caden looked at me for a long, quiet moment. What's the difference? He asked. The difference, I said, is whether I'm looking at a betrayal or a setup. Understanding moved across his face. He looked at me with those gold eyes. All that weight and all that history behind them. And for a moment I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. Not for himself. For me. Both, he said quietly. I think it might be both. The morning light moved. A bird called from the tree line, sharp and high and gone. And I stood very still in the clearing and let the new understanding of things settle over me like the dew. Both. A betrayal and a setup. Which meant someone I'd chosen to trust had been compromised. Which meant, how long has Maris been in Blackthorn? Caden asked. Very gently. The way you hand someone something that might break them. I heard the question. I understood the question. I didn't answer it. Because the answer, 4 years, the same length of time I'd been here. She arrived weeks before me. She was the first wolf to befriend me. She knew about the bloodborne flag and claimed it was accidental. The answer was arranging itself into a shape I wasn't ready to look at directly. I want to be wrong, I said. I know. Tell me I could be wrong. He was quiet for a moment. You could be wrong, he said. Carefully. Without certainty. It didn't help. But I held it anyway. What do we do about Serafini? I asked. Because that I could process. That was confirmed. Nothing yet, he said. If we move on her, she'll send a signal and Vale will know his plant has been burned. We keep her in place. Let her feed him what we want him to see. Use her. Yes. The way she used me. Something sharp moved through my voice. The way she used you, he agreed. Without softening it. I appreciated that. We stood in the clearing as the morning fully arrived. Golden and cool and smelling of pine resin and damp earth, and beneath all of it, cedar and lightning. Him. The bond hummed. I was so tired of fighting it. Not giving in to it. I wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready. Had every reason in the world to hold it at careful distance. But fighting the awareness of it. Burning energy on resisting the pull. On maintaining the careful space between us. It was exhausting. And in the exhaustion of it, something honest surfaced. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Not angry this time. Just tired. From the beginning. When you knew who I was. Why the rejection? Why not? Why not just come to me and say, this is what you are, this is the danger, I need to help you. He was quiet. I was afraid you'd run, he said. You're afraid I'd. I stared at him. I ran because of the rejection. I know. The word was rough. Honest. It was a bad call. I made it in 48 hours with incomplete information, and he stopped. Jaw tight. I made a decision based on what I thought the threat required without considering that you were a person and not a variable. The admission sat between us. Raw. Real. It hurt, I said. What you did at the ceremony. I want you to know that. Not to punish you, just because you should know. I know, he said. Say it like you mean it. He looked at me. It hurt you, he said. And I would do it differently now. I would find another way. The bond moved between us, that half-severed, fraying, impossible thing. and in my chest the ember did something unexpected. It reached toward him. Not the way it reached toward the pack bonds. The analytical, investigative reach of the bloodborne gift. This was different. This was the maid in me, the part that had recognized him across a bonfire and never quite recovered. I pulled it back. Gently. Not in rejection. Not yet. We should go inside, I said. He nodded, and as we walked back toward the pack house, not touching, careful distance maintained, I felt the moment shift. Something had loosened between us. Not resolved. Not healed. But loosened. Like a knot that has been pulled so tight it started to give. And somewhere north of us, I was certain, in the way the blood-born part of me was becoming certain about things. Marcus Vale was not standing still. He was moving, and we were running out of time to be ready. Chapter 8. He arrived on the 7th day. Not Vale himself. An emissary. A wolf I'd never seen. Tall, pale, with the kind of stillness that had been trained into him rather than earned. Wearing the tribunal gray that wasn't quite a uniform but served the same function. He arrived at the Blackthorn border at dawn under a flag of negotiation, which meant by pack law they had to let him speak. I wasn't supposed to know he was there. Caden had specifically said, quietly, firmly, with that alpha finality, that I should stay inside while the meeting happened. I watched from the window of my room, with the ember pressed flat and my awareness spread thin across the web of pack bonds. Carefully, precisely the way I'd practiced, and I listened. Not with my ears. With the gift. The emissary's bond was different from anything I'd touched in the pack web. It wasn't manipulated like Serafini's. It was built differently. Reinforced. Layered. Like a wall rather than a thread. Thick with tribunal loyalty from foundation up. Nothing natural underneath. Nothing to leverage or trace. A soldier's bond. Made, not born. I pulled back from it quickly. I focused on Caden instead, on the particular tension in his alpha bond as he stood at the border and listened to whatever the emissary was saying. I couldn't hear words, but I could feel the emotional current in the bonds around him. And what I felt was alarm, controlled, compressed, managed by a man who'd spent years learning to manage exactly this kind of alarm. But underneath the control, the thread of it running hot and urgent through every bond he held with this pack. Something the emissary said had frightened him. I was out the door before I decided to move. Maris was in the corridor. She stepped in front of me, not blocking but present, her expression doing something complicated. Lena, how many did Vale send to the border? I asked. She hesitated. One beat too long. How did you? How many, Maris? One emissary. 2 guards at the tree line. She searched my face. Caden said you should stay. What is the emissary saying? Another hesitation. And in that hesitation, I reached, lightly, instinctively, toward her bond thread. I didn't mean to. The gift did it before I could stop it. And what I found? Maris's bond thread was bright. Fiercely, genuinely bright. Her loyalty to this pack, to me, ran through it like current through copper, hot and clear and entirely real. But beside it, faint, almost invisible, the ghost of something that used to be there. Not a manipulation currently active. A scar, where a manipulation used to be. Old enough that the thread had healed around it, grown over the foreign intrusion, and buried it. Healed it the way a body heals around a splinter. She hadn't known. Or, she hadn't known recently. Maris, I said carefully. She looked at me. There was a tribunal thread in your bond, I said. There isn't any more. It's been removed. Her face went still. The way a face goes still when something lands that it already knew and had been carrying alone. How long did you know? I asked. I found out 4 months ago, she said quietly, when I started noticing gaps in my own memory. Small ones, times I couldn't account for. I went to Caden. You went to Caden. He had someone remove it. She met my eyes. It wasn't placed by consent. It was placed when I came to this pack. I think before I arrived, actually. I think they used my search for my sister to make me a vector. I was so focused on finding her that I didn't notice something entering the bond. My sister. They took her sister. And then used her grief and her searching to compromise her. The Ashen Tribunal. I thought of my mother, Sable Voss, running from Marcus Vale with a child and a borrowed name and 13 years of trying to make sure I never became a weapon in anyone's hands. Did you give them anything real? I asked. Before the thread was removed? I don't know, she said. That's the terrifying part. I don't know what I said or when or to whom. Her voice was steady, the steadiness of someone who has had months to make peace with something horrible. That's why I told you to keep your circle small. Not because I was the informant. Because I had been one without knowing it, and I didn't know if there were others like me who didn't know yet. I exhaled. Long. Slow. And then I stepped forward and put my arms around her. She stiffened, surprised. Then her arms came up and she held on, fierce and tight, the way she'd held on every time this world tried to shred something important. I'm sorry, she said into my shoulder. Don't, I said. You were targeted. Don't apologize for being human enough to be used. We pulled back. She wiped at her face, efficiently, quickly, like she was annoyed at herself for it. What's happening at the border? I asked. The emissary brought an offer. She steadied her voice. From Vale. He's offering, she stopped. Something crossed her face. He's offering to leave Blackthorn territory in peace. All current and future pressure withdrawn. In exchange. I already knew. Me, I said. They're calling it a voluntary transfer, she said. They want you to come to the tribunal compound willingly. They're claiming they can help you stabilize the power. That without proper tribunal guidance, a second-generation bloodborne is a danger to herself and everyone around her. And if I don't go willingly? She didn't answer, which was its own answer. I turned and walked back toward the front of the pack house, toward the entrance, toward the border where Caden was standing between me and a man who served my father. I pushed the front door open. 3 enforcers materialized immediately, positioned to intercept, not aggressive but very present. Step aside, I said. Alpha's orders. Step aside. The ember moved. Not a surge, a presence. A pressure in the air around me that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with what lived in my blood. The enforcers looked at each other. They stepped aside. I walked through the pack house grounds toward the border, past the training field, past the supply house, through the last ring of trees before the line where Blackthorn territory ended and everything else began. Caden was there. The emissary was there, tall, pale, those train-still eyes finding me the moment I emerged. Caden turned at my approach. Lena. I heard, I said. I stopped beside him, shoulder to shoulder. I heard the offer. His jaw tightened. How? Gift, I said simply. The emissary's gaze moved over me with that clinical, inventorying attention I recognized now as tribunal trained. Assessing, cataloging, looking for the power signature he'd been sent to locate. Lena Ashford, he said. His voice was flat and formal. On behalf of Alpha Vale and the Ashen Tribunal. I heard the offer, I said. The answer is no. Something moved in the emissary's face. He hadn't expected me to be here. To speak. You should consider carefully, he said. The tribunal's interest in your well-being is genuine. Your power is mine, I said. Quiet, clear, entirely certain, without guidance. I have guidance, I said. I have the Alpha of Blackthorn and a pack bond and 7 days of training that your Alpha didn't account for. I held the emissary's eyes. Tell Marcus Vale, tell my father, that his key doesn't open the lock he thinks it does. The emissary was silent. The guards behind him shifted. And then Caden's hand, warm and deliberate and entirely unexpected, settled at the small of my back. Not possessive. Not performative. A steadying. I'm here. I've got you. The bond sang. I let it. The answer is no, Caden said. His alpha voice, complete and final and carrying that deep structural command that made the air feel different. And this territory is closed to tribunal representatives effective now. You have an hour to reach the outer boundary. The emissary looked at us, both of us standing together, the rejected mate and the alpha who rejected her, shoulder to shoulder with a story he hadn't been briefed on. He would report it. Vale would hear it. And whatever calculation Vale had been running, whatever timeline, whatever plan, it would change. I was counting on that. The emissary turned and walked back through the trees. The moment he was gone, Caden's hand left my back. I missed it immediately. I hated that I missed it. That was reckless, he said. That was necessary, I said. He needed to see that I wasn't what Vale's reports described. A shamed Omega hiding in a corner. I turned to face him. He needed to see that I know what I am. And do you? He asked quietly. I thought about the web of bonds. The manipulated thread. The ember in my chest that had grown from a coal to something closer to a fire in 7 days. The way the power reached and listened and mapped the world in a language no one had taught me, a language I'd been born speaking. More every day, I said. He looked at me, and something in those gold eyes, something that had been managed and shuttered and controlled every time I'd gotten close enough to see it, finally moved. Moved toward me. We have maybe 4 days, he said, before Vale stops sending emissaries. I know. We need to find the original informant. We need to. Caden. He stopped. I looked at him, at the tension in every line of him, the weight of all the planning, the exhaustion of holding the entire board in his head while the world moved the pieces. 4 days, I said. We have 4 days. One problem at a time. He looked at me for a long moment. And then, quietly, unexpectedly, like something released that had been held too long, he laughed. Just once. Short and low and genuine. And it undid me completely. Because it was the first real thing I'd heard from him. The first unguarded, unmanaged, unperformed thing. And it sounded like what the bond had been promising all along. Something worth having. I turned away before my face could say so. Come on, I said. We have work to do. He followed. And the ember burned. Chapter 9. We found the original informant on the 3rd day. Not through investigation. Not through tracking or interrogation, or the careful cross-referencing of timelines that Caden had been running in parallel since my arrival. We found them because they made a move. And the move was aimed at me. It happened in the evening. Caden was in a pack meeting. The kind that ran long. The kind where Alpha Authority had to be visible and present, and the room needed his weight in it. I was in the small library off the East Corridor, working through a second archive volume he'd given me. Historical records of bloodborne births, their power signatures, the range of what the gift could and couldn't do. I was reading about a bloodborne from the Northern Territories. A woman named Kale who had, according to the archive, managed to sever 17 simultaneous pack bonds in a single release. When I smelled something wrong. Not a person. A substance. It was faint. Underneath the book dust and the old wood and the distant cooking smells from the pack kitchen. Something sharp and chemical that had no natural origin in this building. I looked up. The cup of tea on the table beside me. Maris had brought it an hour ago. Maris, who had been compromised without her knowledge. Who had said she didn't know what she might have said or to whom. Who might not have known she was still being used even after the thread was removed. Because some tribunal techniques ran behavioral rather than bond-based. Not a thread. A conditioning. A pattern so well established that the host followed it without needing to be connected. The cup was steaming gently. I hadn't drunk from it yet. I reached toward it. With the gift, not my hand. And what I felt in the liquid was wrong in a way I didn't have words for. A suppression agent. Something designed to press the ember down and hold it there. Not permanently. Not a kill, not a poison. A dampener. Long enough to move me. To carry me out of the territory, while I was too suppressed to trigger the power release. To hand me over. The library door was behind me. Someone had been waiting. I heard the handle. I moved. Not away from the door. Toward the bookshelf. I pressed myself flat against the wall beside the shelf, reached inward with everything I had, and let the ember rise. Not the full release. Not the uncontrolled surge I'd almost triggered on that first day at the tree line. Something in between, a controlled surge, the way you hold a fire in your cupped hands. The door opened. A pack enforcer entered. One I recognized. One of Caden's inner circle. A wolf named Bren who'd been part of Blackthorn for 11 years. Who had one of those deep-worn bond threads I'd noted on my first reach through the web. Except, when he turned toward where I'd been sitting and found the chair empty. I felt his bond. And it was changed. Not like Serafini's. The tribunal thread running parallel to the host bond. Not like the scar in Maris's thread where something had been and then removed. This was older. Deeper. This thread hadn't been manipulated from outside. It had been replaced. The host bond, the natural, earned loyalty of 11 years in this pack, had been hollowed out and something else put in its place. Carefully. So carefully that only a second-generation bloodborne reading the threads from the inside would find the difference. He'd been turned years ago. Not recently. Years. He'd been inside Blackthorn's inner circle, feeding the tribunal. Feeding Vale. For long enough that my mother's location had been given away before she died. Long enough that when I arrived, the information had moved before any system scan could flag it. He'd been the first informant all along. Not Maris. Never Maris. Bren turned and found me standing against the wall. His face changed. The performance dropped, cleanly, the way a mask drops when the wearer stops pretending. And what was underneath wasn't a wolf I recognized. What was underneath was something that answered to someone else entirely. You didn't drink it, he said. No, I said. That's unfortunate. He moved. He was fast, enforcer trained, 11 years of it. And in a straight physical confrontation, I was an Omega she-wolf with a week of power training. I wasn't fighting him physically. The ember opened. Not full release. I pulled it back from the edge, held it at the threshold, directed it with everything I'd practiced in 7 days of sitting on floors and learning what I was, and sent it through the bond web like a signal. A single clean pulse, aimed at his thread. The tribunal replaced loyalty cracked. Not shattered, not the full bloodborne disruption I was capable of, just a fracture, a fault line running through the false bond. And the sensation of it stopped Bren mid-step like a physical blow. He went to one knee, his hand to his chest, his face bewildered. The bewilderment of a man who has been running on an external program for years, and just felt the static interrupt it. I didn't wait. Caden. I sent it through the alpha bond. The mate bond, still half-severed, still fraying, but alive. Not a word, not language, just the urgent pressure of here, now library. The bond answered. In under a minute, the library door opened. Caden. 2 enforcers. Maris behind them, her face shifting through shock to fury when she saw Bren on the floor. He's the first informant, I said. My voice was steady. Remarkable, I thought, considering. His bond was replaced, not manipulated. Replaced. He's been running tribunal loyalty for years. I paused. He tried to drug me. Suppression agent in the T. They were going to move me while I was dampened. Silence. The enforcers looked at Bren. At Caden. Caden looked at Bren. And what moved through his face was something complicated and cold and very final. The look of someone who has just found the crack in the wall they'd been standing on. Take him to the holding room, Caden said. Quiet. Absolute. I'll talk, Bren said from the floor. His voice was strange. Emptied out, a man trying to find himself and finding less than expected. Whatever they put in the bond, I felt it crack. I can feel the difference. He looked up. I'll tell you everything. Caden looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said. You will. The enforcers moved. The room emptied. Maris crossed to me and took both my hands and held them and looked at my face with those fierce, honest eyes. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said. You're shaking. I know. I was. Fine tremors running through my hands. The aftermath of the controlled surge. The power pulling back to its resting state with the complaint of something that had wanted to go further. It's just the power settling. You did it, she said. You cracked his bond. Partially. I steadied my breathing. Enough. Lena. She squeezed my hands. You stopped an extraction. By yourself. In under a minute. I thought about that. 7 days ago, I didn't know the power existed. 7 days ago, I was carrying a backpack and $143, and the plan to walk out of my life quietly. How much could change? How completely? Caden was still in the room. He'd stayed. I looked at him over Maris's shoulder. He was standing near the door, watching me. And he had the expression he got when he was managing something that didn't want to be managed. We need to talk, I said. Yes, he said. Maris looked between us. Let go of my hands. I'll be in the kitchen, she said diplomatically. Making actual tea. A look at the cup on the table. Not whatever that is. She left. The room was quiet. Caden moved to the table. Picked up the cup, carefully, keeping his hands only on the exterior, and set it aside where neither of us would accidentally touch it. He turned to face me. You called through the bond, he said. Yes. You used the mate bond to signal me. It was the fastest route. I held his gaze. You felt it. I felt it, he said. Something raw in his voice. Something he wasn't quite managing. Your alpha bond and the mate bond are. I searched for the right words. They're connected. The mate bond amplifies the alpha bond. When you accepted the pack, when the alpha bond formed, the mate bond was already there, and it wove into it. That's why the rejection didn't fully sever it. I paused. And that's why, if I used the full bloodborne release without the mate bond as an anchor, it wouldn't just disrupt the tribunal thread in Serafini's bond. It would disrupt everything. Every bond in the pack. He was very still. Including the alpha bond, he he said. Including everything. I held his gaze. So the bond between us, the incomplete one, the half-severed one, is the only thing standing between my power and a full uncontrolled release. Silence. The rejection, he said slowly. When I rejected you, you didn't fully sever it. That's why I felt the strange half-break. I kept my voice even. But you damaged it enough that it's not fully anchoring the power anymore. Every time I use the gift, the risk of uncontrolled release increases. I paused. We need to restore the bond. The words sat between us like something enormous. He looked at me. I looked at him. And neither of us pretended that restoring the bond was a simple procedural matter. That it was just about power stability or tactical advantage, or managing the threat from Marcus Vale. We were both too honest for that. That's not a small thing, he said. What you're asking. I know. If we restore the bond, a full restoration, it's not reversible. Not without. I know, I said again. I'm not asking you to restore it tonight. I'm telling you what needs to happen before Vale makes his next move. So you have the full picture. I held his gaze. So there's no more rationing. No more, that's tomorrow's conversation. He was quiet for a long moment. The library was very still. Outside, the last of the daylight was failing, and the room was going to amber and shadow, and the bond between us hummed in the particular frequency it used when we were close and unguarded. Lena, he said. Yes. He crossed the room. Stopped in front of me. Closer than he'd let himself get since the morning in the clearing when his hand had found my back. Close enough for the bond to ache. I never wanted to reject you, he said. Very quietly. I want you to know that. Not because it's useful information. Just because it's true. And I'm done making decisions about what truth you can handle. I looked up at him. I know, I said. Quietly. Do you? I do now. His hand came up, slow, deliberate, giving me every opportunity to step back. And his fingers touched my jaw. Just there. Barely touching. The lightest possible contact. The bond erupted. Not the power. Not the bloodborne fire. The mate bond. The thing that had recognized him across a bonfire and never recovered. The thing that was supposed to have been cut, and hadn't been, and had been building pressure for 7 days of floors and training and morning clearings and too careful distance. It ran through me from jaw to sternum to every extremity. Like lightning coming home. His eyes closed for just a moment. When they opened, those gold eyes were not flat. Not shuttered. Not managed. Open. One problem at a time, he said softly. Yes, I agreed. Neither of us moved away. Chapter 10. He didn't leave the library. Neither did I. We didn't talk about the touch. We didn't analyze it or name it or try to fit it into the framework of everything complicated between us. We just stayed. In the same room. At the same table. While Caden worked through Bren's preliminary testimony, and I read the last pages of the archive volume, and the night settled fully over Blackthorn territory like a held breath. Bren had given them a timeline. 18 years. That was how long the tribunal thread had been running in his bond. Placed before he ever joined Blackthorn. Placed when he was a young wolf in a border pack. Recruited by a tribunal agent with promises, and then rewritten without his knowledge and sent to infiltrate. 18 years. The information he'd fed them ran back further than my arrival. Further than my mother's death. It explained the rogue attack that hadn't been a rogue attack. Explained why my mother's location had been known, why she'd crossed the border, why the power had released. It hadn't been rage that drove her out. It had been a message. A deliberate trigger. Go to the border, Sable. The only way to keep your daughter safe is to go to the border and release the power. Vale's pack is already inside the territory. If you don't release, they'll take the child. A lie. A tribunal lie, fed through the bond, designed to look like pack intelligence. She'd gone. She'd released. And she'd died believing she was saving me. I sat with that for a long time. Caden watched me across the table. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't say it would be all right. He just watched, with those open eyes that were still doing what they'd started doing in the library. And stayed. Sometimes staying is the only comfort that works. She didn't know, I said finally. No, he said. She died thinking she was protecting me. Yes, she was protecting me, I said. The release stopped them from entering the territory that night. It burned the approach path. They couldn't get to me for 9 years after that. I paused. She won. She just didn't know she won. Caden was quiet for a moment. I think, he he said carefully, that she would have found a way to know. I looked at him. I think that's why she left you the journal, he said. I'd forgotten. The journal in my backpack. The small leather-bound thing I'd carried out of my cabin on the morning I tried to leave. I hadn't opened it in days. I reached under the table and pulled it out. Worn leather. Soft at the corners. My name. Not Ashford, my real name, the one my mother had used in private when no one else was listening. Scratched into the inside cover in her handwriting. For Lena Voss. When you're ready. I'd always thought that meant ready to read it. I was beginning to think it meant something else. When you're ready to know what you are. May I? Caden asked. I looked at him. He held out his hand. I gave him the journal. He opened it, carefully, with the same deliberate care he brought to everything, and turned to the last entry. Not the first. The last. He read it. His expression didn't change, but something moved through his scent. That cedar and lightning smell sharpening slightly. Something that wasn't quite sorrow, and wasn't quite grief, but lived in the same neighborhood. He set the journal on the table between us, opened to the last page, and turned it to face me. The entry was dated 3 weeks before she died. She's going to be more than either of us. More than me, more than him. I've felt it, the way the gift moves in her when she's sleeping, reaching outward, tasting the world. She's going to need someone to stand with her when it wakes up. Someone who isn't afraid of it. If she reads this after I'm gone, and I think she will, I want her to know, the power isn't a curse. It isn't a weapon. It isn't a key to anyone's door but yours. It's just you, baby. It's just who you are. Don't let anyone make it smaller than that. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth. Just for a moment. Just until the feeling passed the sharp part. Caden said nothing. He was right not to say anything. I lowered my hand. Breathed. Closed the journal. She knew about you, I said. About the Alpha of Blackthorn. That there would be a mate. She sent a letter, Caden said. To my predecessor. When I was young. When she was still alive. It described you. What you'd be. What you'd need. He paused. I found it in the Alpha records when I took the title. I was 24. You'd have been about 13. And you've been preparing since then. Not well enough, he said. Well enough to still be standing, I said. He looked at me. The bond hummed between us, warm and aching and present, the half-severed thing finding ways to speak even through the damage. Tomorrow, I said. Vale will move tomorrow. Yes. No hesitation. He knew it too. Bren's capture, Serafini will have already signaled it. She'll have felt the disruption in the pack when we took him. I thought through the sequence. He'll know his secondary plant is burned. He'll know his extraction plan failed. He'll know I'm awake and trained, and that I used the gift against his informant. He'll move before we can prepare further, Caden said. So we don't wait. I looked at him steadily. We choose the ground. Caden studied me. You want to set a meeting point, he said. I want to draw him to a place where I control the variables. I held his gaze. The eastern clearing. The one we've been training in. I know every bond thread in that clearing. I know the terrain. I know how the power moves in the open air. I paused. He thinks he's coming to take a girl who doesn't know what she is. Understanding moved across his face. You want him to come here believing he has the advantage, he said. I want him to come here full stop, I said. Because if we wait for him to choose the ground, we're always on the back foot. If we invite the confrontation, we control the shape of it. Yes. He was quiet. Processing. The alpha in him running the chess. The positions, the risks, the variables. It's not just his emissaries he'll bring, he said. He'll come himself. I know. If you face your father. I know, I said again. I've thought about that. Have you? All night, I said. Every version of this ends with me facing him. Waiting doesn't change that. It just gives him more time to maneuver, and gives me more time to be afraid. I set my hands flat on the table. I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of what happens if I face him underprepared. Those are different fears, and only one of them has a solution. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and put his hand over mine. Not the light, barely their touch from earlier. This was deliberate. Warm. I'm here. I've got you. The bond, I said. My voice was careful. Before tomorrow. It needs to be restored. His hand didn't move. I know, he said. Not because the power requires it, I said. I mean, it does require it. But that's not. I stopped. I want you to know that's not the only reason I'm asking. A long silence. Outside, the pack was settling into the deep quiet of late night. The house had stopped creaking. The lights had gone out room by room. Somewhere far away, a wolf in shifted form was running the northern border. I could feel the bond thread moving swiftly through the territory web. "Lena," Caden said. "Yes, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it without immediately arguing with it." I waited. "I have been in love with the idea of you," he said, "since I read your mother's letter at 24 years old. Since she described a daughter with fire in her bones and a refusal to be made small." He paused. "And I have been terrified of you since the moment I felt the bond at the ceremony. Because you were everything she described. And I knew what finding you meant. What Vale would do, what the tribunal would do, what I would have to put you through to keep you safe." His voice was steady, careful, and I handled it wrong. I chose strategy over honesty and I hurt you, and if I could go back. "You'd do it differently," I said softly. "I'd do it so differently." I looked at our hands on the table, his over mine, the bond running between us like a current that had always been there, waiting for someone to stop interrupting it. "The bond restoration," I said. "It happens when both parties choose it, consciously, without coercion." "Yes," he said. "I choose it," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of something irrevocable. He looked at me, and those gold eyes were fully open, fully present, nothing managed, nothing controlled. "I choose it," he said. The bond answered. Not gradually. Not the slow strengthening I'd felt over days of training and proximity. All at once, like a door opening onto a room that had always existed. The fraying edges pulled together. The severed threads reached for each other. The incomplete, damaged, impossible thing between us completed. The wave of it moved through me from chest to extremities. Warm and enormous and entirely unlike the power, entirely unlike the ember. This was something different. Something older than either of us. Something that felt like. Finally, the ember responded too. Not in opposition. In relief. As if the anchor it had always needed had finally caught. As if the power had been straining against its own weight, and only now had something to hold it steady. I breathed. Caden's hand tightened over mine. "Okay," I said. My voice was not quite steady. "Okay," he agreed. We sat in the library with the bond restored between us, and the night outside, and Marcus Vale, somewhere beyond the tree line. Tomorrow. Everything tomorrow. But for now this. Chapter 11. He came at dawn. Not with subtlety. Not with the procedural formality of emissaries and flags. Marcus Vale came to the eastern clearing of Blackthorn territory with 30 tribunal wolves, and the absolute certainty of a man who had never, in his entire life, encountered something he couldn't take. I'd felt him approaching for 20 minutes before he arrived. The bond web told me everything. The pulse of foreign presences entering the outer territory, pressing against the border wards like fingers testing glass. 30 threads I didn't recognize, running with that same thick, reinforced tribunal construction I'd felt in Bren's replaced bond and the emissaries' built-from-scratch loyalty. They didn't try to be quiet. They didn't need to be. They were 30 tribunal wolves, and the alpha who had been searching for me since before I was born. Caden was on my left. Maris on my right. Her bond thread burning with that fierce copper clarity that I now knew was entirely real. Every bit of it hers and genuine and chosen. Behind us, Blackthorn's enforcers. 22 wolves. Fewer in number, but bonded, naturally, honestly, with the earned loyalty of wolves who'd chosen this pack because they believed in it. Serafini was not there. Caden had moved her to the pack house before dawn. Quietly, 2 enforcers. A short conversation in which he'd told her they knew everything, and that she had a choice about how the next hour went. She'd made the choice. She was in the holding room now. The information she'd been sending to Vale in the last 12 hours had been carefully curated by Caden. Designed to tell Vale exactly what we wanted him to believe when he arrived. That I was undertrained. That the bond was still severed. That I was frightened. Marcus Vale walked into the clearing, and I felt him before I saw him properly. His presence moved through the territory bonds like a stone dropped into still water. Not because he was bonded to this pack, but because the blood-born gift recognized its origin. The source of half of what I was. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and broad, and carrying himself with the particular authority of a man who had never needed to announce himself. The kind of power that had been so long uncontested it had become indistinguishable from nature. Silver-streaked dark hair. A face that would have been handsome without what lived behind it. Behind those eyes, which were the same shade of dark amber as mine, though his carried nothing warm. He looked at me, and I felt his recognition. The blood-born gift in him, older, trained to a precision mine hadn't reached yet, reaching toward me like a hand. I didn't flinch. Lena Voss, he said. My mother's name. My real name. Lena Ashford, I said. The name my mother gave me. The name I'm keeping. Something moved in his face. Not quite emotion, but its shadow. Your mother was a remarkable woman, he said. She was, I said. You killed her. She killed herself, he said. A blood-born without a proper anchor. Crossed the boundary because one of your plants lied to her. I held his gaze. Told her a tribunal team was inside the territory and coming for me. Made her think a release was the only way to stop them. I paused. Was there actually a team inside the territory that night? Silence. No, he said. And to his credit, if credit was something this man deserved, he didn't perform a denial. There wasn't. She died for nothing, I said. Because you wanted to see if the power would trigger in crisis conditions. She died because she was untrained and scared. His voice was flat. Scientific. Which is what you'll be, which is what you are, without tribunal guidance. You've had a week. A week with a pack alpha who reads archives and calls it preparation. He looked at Caden. A dismissal in the glance, barely a glance. You are an undetonated instrument, Lena. The most powerful bloodborn born in 3 generations. What you'll do to this pack, to this man, when the power fully releases without anchor. The bond is restored, Caden said. Vale's eyes moved to him, then back to me, and I saw the calculation shift. He looked at me differently, looking for something, the signature of a completed bond, the power profile of a bloodborn with a mate anchor. He found it. That, he said slowly, changes nothing. It changes everything, I said. A mate bond is a single anchor point, he said. Against 30 tribunal wolves, against the collective bond weight of my team. Tell me about the key, I said. He went still. Just for a moment. Just enough. You said she was a key, Caden said. At the border. Your emissary used the word. An inelegant metaphor. No, I said. It wasn't. It was the most precise thing you've said. I watched his face. I've been thinking about it for 4 days. What is a bloodborne open? What door could need a key that has this much power attached to it? He said nothing. I reached into the web. I did it carefully. The most careful reach I'd ever attempted, with the restored bond humming steadily beneath me like a foundation, like bedrock. I reached through the blackthorn bonds, past them, out toward the 30 tribunal threads. And I found it. Not a bond. A seal. Something ancient and constructed and maintained. Held in place by the collective tribunal bond weight, the way an arch is held by pressure from both sides. 40 years of it, maybe more. Something that had been locked away when my mother was first identified, and the tribunal had understood what her child might become. A seal on something that wanted to be free. There's something locked, I said. In the tribunal bond web. Something you've been containing. I held Vale's gaze. And you need me to open it. Need is a strong word, he said. What is it? I asked. It doesn't matter what it. Tell me what you sealed, I said. Or I take the bloodborne gift and I show you exactly what a second generation can do to 30 tribunal bonds when she's fully anchored and not afraid of you. Vale looked at me. I looked at Vale. And in the cleared morning air of the eastern clearing, with the dew on the grass and the pine trees at the edges and the bond burning steady in my chest, he believed me. Because I believed myself. It's a registry, he said. A bloodborne registry. Every bloodborne and bloodborne adjacent wolf born in 3 centuries. Names. Locations. Power profiles. His voice was flat. The High Tribunal sealed it 40 years ago when they decided the information was too dangerous for use. I've been maintaining the seal. If it breaks, I said slowly. Every bloodborne the High Tribunal has been hiding from themselves gets found. Gets found by whoever breaks the seal, he said. By whoever the power flows through on release. You wanted to use me to break it, I said. And redirect the information to you. To us, he said. You're bloodborne. That registry is your community. Your people. The ones the High Tribunal has been suppressing and hiding and using as weapons and killing when inconvenient, I said. Like my mother. The High Tribunal is not better than you, I said. I know. I've read the archive. I held his gaze. But you're not better than them. You want the same registry for the same reason. A list of names is a list of leverage. It doesn't matter whether it's the High Tribunal, or the Ashen Tribunal, or any other institution with tribunal in the name. A list of bloodborns in your hands is a list of people you can use. Or protect, he said. You don't get to use that word, I said. You used it about my mother. She's dead. Silence. Long. He looked at me with those dark amber eyes that were my eyes in a face I didn't want to share. What are you going to do? He said. I'm going to break the seal, I said. Something moved in his face, triumph barely contained. Not for you, I said immediately. Not redirected to you, or to the High Tribunal, or to any institution that wants the information to use against the people on the list. I looked at Caden, just for a moment, just to check, and he nodded, steady and sure. I'm going to break it, and I'm going to disperse it. To every pack on 3 continents simultaneously. Public record. No single holder. No leverage point. Vale went very still. You can't. I'm second generation, I said. Anchored. Standing on soil I've trained on for 7 days with a bond that's been building toward this my entire life. I held his gaze. I think you'll find the word can't has a limited vocabulary around me. He moved. 30 tribunal wolves moved with him. And I opened. Not a surge. Not the uncontrolled release my mother had died from. Something entirely different. Something that the 7 days and the bond and the floor sitting and the morning clearings and the ember's patient growth had been building toward. Intention. The bloodborne gift reached outward. Anchored in the mate bond, directed by full consciousness, aimed with everything I had, through the blackthorn bonds, through the tribunal threads, past the collective bond weight of 30 wolves bearing down like a wall. I found the seal. Ancient. Heavy. Maintained by 4 decades of tribunal power. I hit it the way a key hits a lock. Not breaking. Turning. The seal cracked. And the registry. The names, the locations, the power profiles of 3 centuries of bloodborns hidden from the world, poured through me. For one blinding, enormous, impossible moment I held it all. Every name. Every face that went with the name. Every suppressed gift, every hidden child. Every wolf who had been told what they were was dangerous and shameful and needed containing. All of it. Mine. And I released it. Outward. In every direction. Through every bond web I could reach. Pack by pack, territory by territory, the information moving like ripples across water. Finding every alpha bond on 3 continents and depositing a copy, equal and complete. No single holder. No leverage point. Public record. Free. The release lasted approximately 4 seconds. When it ended, I was on my knees in the eastern clearing. Both hands flat on the cold morning grass. Breathing. The ember was not gone. It was spent. Temporarily. The way a fire settles after a large burn. Still there. Still warm. Still mine. Just resting. The bond was blazing. Caden was beside me before I fully registered movement. His hand on my back, his warmth on my left side, the mate bond running between us like a live wire and making every single thing I'd just done feel manageable. Survivable. I looked up. Marcus Vale was standing very still in the middle of the clearing. Around him, 30 tribunal wolves were bewildered. The bond disruption had cracked the reinforced tribunal threads. Not destroyed, but fractured enough that several of them were looking at each other with the stunned expression of people who had just remembered what it felt like to have their own thoughts. Vale looked at me. It's gone, he said. The seal is gone. Yes, I said. The registry is. Everywhere, I said. Every alpha on 3 continents has it. By morning it'll have propagated through every pack bond web on the continent. By the end of the week, every wolf who is bloodborne or bloodborne adjacent will know they're not alone. I held his gaze. That's what you wanted, wasn't it? Bloodborns who knew each other? Who could find each other? Not like this. Then you should have thought about what like this looks like when you gave the key to someone who loved her mother. I said. He stood very still. Around him, the tribunal wolves were receding, not fleeing, but uncertain. Without the bond direction, without the sealed goal, without the coordinated purpose. They were just wolves, standing in a clearing on someone else's territory at dawn. Vale looked at me for a long moment. I couldn't read his face entirely. He was too controlled for that, and I was too wrung out from the release to push the gift further. But in the very last second before he turned away, I thought I saw something. Not triumph. Not anger. Something that might, in a different life, have been pride. He turned. He walked out of the clearing. His wolves followed, and Blackthorn's enforcers held the line, steady and solid and bonded, until the last tribunal presence faded from the territory web. Then the clearing went quiet. Just pine trees and morning light and dew and the distant call of birds returning to the air. Maris exhaled beside me, a shaking, relieved, fierce sound. "You brilliant, terrifying person," she said. I laughed. It came out slightly wrecked. Caden helped me to my feet. Steady hands, steady presence, the bond between us running at full strength for the first time and feeling like nothing I'd expected. Not heavy, not restricting. Expansive, like a door opening. I looked at him. He looked at me. And the thing in his face, those open, unguarded gold eyes, was so uncomplicated in its entirety that it almost undid me. Not love. Not yet. We hadn't earned that word yet, hadn't lived inside the restored bond long enough to call it by its full name. But it's beginning. It's honest, chosen, fully awake beginning. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I know," I said. He laughed. That low, genuine sound that I was collecting like evidence. I leaned into his side, just slightly, just enough, and he let me. And we stood in the eastern clearing as the morning fully opened, and the last of the tribunal wolves faded from the territory web and Blackthorn. Whole, bonded, intact, settled into the particular quiet of something that has survived. Chapter 12. 3 weeks later. The pack felt different. Not dramatically. Not in the ways you might expect. Not with visible upheaval or ceremony. Just differently textured. The way a room feels different after you've moved one piece of furniture, and everything else slightly reorganizes around the changed space. Bren had been processed through pack law, a long, difficult series of hearings that Caden had handled with the kind of careful, exhausting fairness that made me respect the process even when I wanted it to move faster. The verdict had been exile rather than punishment, because the tribunal bond had replaced his agency for 18 years, and the pack law of Blackthorn recognized the difference between a traitor and a victim. He'd left quietly on a gray Tuesday morning. I'd watched him go and felt the complicated shape of something that wasn't forgiveness, yet but was moving in that direction. Serafini had gone before him, 2 days after the clearing. She'd given Caden a full account of everything she'd fed to Vale, everything she'd been directed to do, the complete timeline of her 6 months in Blackthorn. Her tribunal bond had cracked in the clearing. Not fully severed, the way Bren's had been fractured, but damaged enough that the thread had gone quiet. Without the constant direction, she'd seemed lost. The way people seem when they've been running on someone else's instructions for so long that stopping leaves a gap where a self should be. I'd gone to see her the night before she left. She'd looked at me with those silver eyes and said, "I wasn't entirely lying about not being your enemy." "I know," I said. "The accurate information I gave you was accurate," I said. "And it was also a play. Both things were true." She'd nodded. Something in her had seemed relieved to be known clearly. She'd left the next morning without ceremony. I didn't wish her well, but I didn't wish her harm. That felt like enough for now. The registry had propagated exactly as I'd intended. By the end of the first week, 7 pack alphas had contacted Blackthorn with variations on the same message. "We have wolves in our territory flagged in the Bloodborne registry. What do we do?" Caden's answer was consistent. "Ask them. They're the experts on their own power. Start there." Some alphas pushed back. Some didn't. The High Tribunal had issued a formal statement about the breach, cold, procedural language describing the release as an unauthorized access event, and promising a review of bloodborne identification protocols. I'd read the statement and then written a response and sent it through the Blackthorn Alpha Bond network to every pack on 3 continents. The response was shorter than the statement. The people on that registry are not incidents. They are not events. They are not access points or protocols or management problems. They are wolves with gifts. Treat them accordingly. It had been signed, Lena Ashford Blackthorn. Maris had laughed for about 3 minutes when she read it. "You signed it as Pack," she said. "I am Pack," I said. And I was. Not Omega. Not the rejected she-wolf at the edge of the territory. Not the girl with the backpack and the $143 and the plan to disappear. Pack. My choice. Freely made. With a door that opened from the inside. The Ember had returned to full strength within 10 days. Resting state, Caden called it. The level it maintained when not actively in use. warm and deep and present, oriented now toward the bond with a new ease. No longer straining, no longer looking for an anchor. It had won. We'd been careful with each other in the weeks after the clearing. Deliberately, consciously careful. Not from distance or uncertainty, but from the specific kind of care you give something new. Something you want to get right. He'd moved me from the East Wing room. I'd moved myself, technically. I'd packed my things. Much more of them now, accumulated over weeks in a pack house, and carried them to the room he'd offered, across the hall from his. Not in. Across the hall. For now, there was no rush. There was, actually, all the time in the world, which I'd never believed before, which I was starting to believe now. He found me in the library the evening of the 22nd day. I was reading. Not the bloodborne archives, not pack law, not any of the heavy institutional texts I'd been working through. Just a novel. Something with no tactical application whatsoever. Something Maris had pressed into my hands and said, "Read this before you forget what fun is." Caden leaned in the doorway. I looked up. He was doing the thing he'd started doing. The thing I collected alongside the laughs, which was looking at me like I was a problem he'd solved and was now glad to have. "The Northern Pack that contacted us," he said. "The Alpha wants to arrange a meeting. To discuss the registry. Their bloodborne wolf, she's 19. She's been told her whole life that her power was a defect." I felt the familiar low pull in my chest. Not the power. Something adjacent to purpose. "I want to go," I said. "I thought you might." He pushed off the doorframe and walked to the armchair across from me and sat down. Not on the floor this time. In the chair. The one that had become his chair, by the unceremonious process of him consistently choosing it. "I want to come with you." "I know," I said. "Is that?" "Yes," I said. Before he could finish. "Yes, that's fine. Good, actually. A Blackthorn Alpha presence at the meeting will make the host Alpha take it more seriously." "That was one of my reasons," he said. "What are the others?" I asked. He looked at me. "I don't want to be in separate territories from you," he said simply. The bond moved between us. Warm, certain, entirely at ease with itself. I looked at him. This man who had broken me in front of a crowd, and then spent every day since trying to earn back the trust he'd damaged. Who sat on floors. Who stayed in rooms without being asked to. Who laughed exactly once, and then again until the laughing stopped being remarkable and became just his. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he said. I looked back at my book. He pulled a volume from the table beside his chair. One of the pack law texts I'd been working through, left there yesterday and apparently claimed by him in the interval, and opened it. We read. In the library. In the quiet. The bond between us warm and undemanding and entirely, perfectly present. And outside, through the window with no bars. I'd moved to a room with no bars, a room with a door that opened from both sides. The pine trees moved in the evening wind, and somewhere in the pack bonds I could feel Maris running the southern perimeter with one of the younger wolves she'd started mentoring, and the ember in my chest was low and steady and resting, saving itself for whatever came next, whatever we built, whatever I chose. 6 months later, I stood at the border of Blackthorn territory, the same tree line, the same path, the same point where 2 enforcers had stepped out of the trees and blocked my way, and Caden had said come back inside, and I'd looked at the trees and made the calculation that led to everything else. I was not trying to leave. I was standing here on purpose. Maris was somewhere behind me. I could feel the copper clarity of her bond thread without looking, giving me the space to do this the way she always gave me space. Present. Close. Not crowding. She'd found her sister. 3 months ago. She was alive, changed, scarred in ways that the tribunal had spent years calling treatment. But alive and found, and now in a coastal pack 3 territories east that had reached out after the registry dispersal and said, "We have someone here who might belong to you." Maris had gone to see her. She'd come back 2 weeks later and she'd sat in the kitchen and I'd made her the coffee and she'd held it in both hands for a long time before she'd said, "She doesn't remember me. Not fully. But she smiled when she saw me. And she said my name. And I'd sat across the table and let that be enough for today. Because today was all you could hold. But there were a lot of todays. I stood at the border and looked out at the world beyond it. The territory boundary. The invisible line in the earth that I could feel now with the gift. A perceptual edge where the pack web thinned and the open world began. Not a wall. Not a cage. A threshold. I stepped across it. The power moved, expected now, controlled now, anchored in the bond that ran back toward the pack house where Caden was in a meeting, and where my presence in the bond web would tell him exactly where I was and that I was fine. The power reached outward, testing the open air. And I stood in the world outside the pack boundary, and breathed it in and felt the ember run warm and curious and at ease. No surge. No release. No loss of control. Just me, on the outside of the border I'd tried to walk out of 6 months ago, standing in the world with the power fully awake and entirely mine. I turned and looked back at the tree line, at Blackthorn territory, at the pine trees and the gray sky and the faint shape of the pack house roof visible above the canopy. I'd been locked in a room with no door handle. I'd been publicly shamed. I'd found out my mother's death was a constructed tragedy. I'd found out my father was a man who thought of people as instruments. I'd spent a week on floors learning to hold fire with bare hands. I'd stood in a clearing and said no to 30 wolves and meant it in every part of my body. I'd freed 3 centuries of hidden names. I'd chosen a mate. I'd been chosen back. And I was standing outside the pack boundary on a gray autumn morning feeling like myself. The full, uncapped, unrationed version of myself. The version my mother had written about in the last entry of a journal. She'd left me like a set of instructions for the life she'd hoped I'd build. She's going to be more than either of us. The power isn't a curse. It isn't a weapon. It isn't a key to anyone's door but yours. It's just you, baby. It's just who you are. I stepped back across the boundary. Came home. Chose it. The pine trees sighed in the autumn wind. Somewhere in the pack, the bonds hummed. And in my chest, the ember burned. Low and warm and patient in mine, waiting for the next thing I decided to do with it. Some cages are built to keep you in. Some are built to keep you small. The most dangerous are the ones built with good intentions. She learned to recognize the difference. And then she burned every one of them down. What part of Lena's story stayed with you the most? Was it the first moment she chose to stay, or the moment she finally chose to leave on her own terms? Yendi.